Have you ever wondered if your thoughts might be more powerful than they seem? Imagine a single idea, repeated exactly 100 times, not whispered, not shouted, but intentionally felt, over and over, like a mantra echoing through the corridors of your mind. Could something so simple, so subtle, actually alter the course of your life? This is not wishful thinking or spiritual fantasy. There are those who claim that this repetition of thought is more than a practice, it's a doorway, a hidden frequency that begins to shift the unseen gears of reality itself. And the technique, astonishingly, is as straightforward as it sounds. Pick a thought, a vision, a possibility, and repeat it 100 times, but the effects, they might just bend your understanding of what's real. You see, in ancient traditions and modern mind sciences alike, repetition is not random. From sacred chants to affirmations, from the incantations of mystics to the focus exercises of Olympic athletes, repetition has always been a portal to transformation. It works not by magic, but by alignment. The repeated thought begins to etch itself, not just into your memory, but into your perception of reality. Over time, the mind stops questioning it, the body stops resisting, and slowly, silently, the world begins to respond. But here's the strange part: even before anything changes on the outside, something begins shifting on the inside. It's as if reality itself is listening, waiting for the signal that you're finally serious. Let me ask you, have you ever fixated on an idea so intensely that it began to feel real, even before it happened? Maybe it was a dream, a fear, a hope, but the more you thought about it, the more the world seemed to echo it back to you. That's not coincidence. It's the beginning of a deeper interaction between your inner world and the outer one. When you repeat a thought 100 times, you're not just programming your mind, you're broadcasting a frequency. And frequencies have a way of finding resonance. What are your thoughts on this? Have you ever experienced something similar? Let us know in the comments. Of course, right now, this may sound like pure speculation. How can a single sentence, looped over and over, do anything more than pass the time? But that question, that skepticism, is exactly why this technique is so powerful. Because it doesn't require belief at the beginning. It creates belief through repetition. The more you say it, the more familiar it becomes. And the more familiar it becomes, the more natural it feels. Until eventually, it's no longer an affirmation, it's a description of who you are. But what makes this so potent? Why does the act of repeating a thought begin to ripple through your life like an unseen current? And now, the moment of deeper inquiry. What makes this simple mental repetition so powerful that it can reshape your entire world? What mechanism turns a whispered thought into a shift in the fabric of your reality? To answer that, we need to go beyond the mystical and into the biological, into the architecture of your brain, and the way it confuses imagination with reality. Because once you understand how the mind rehearses, records, and ultimately believes in the repeated idea, you'll start to see why the 100 times technique is not just spiritual theory. It's a tool, and perhaps the most underestimated one you possess. Imagine standing at the edge of a river. Each time a thought crosses your mind, it's like a drop of water hitting the surface. One drop means nothing, but repeat the same thought over and over, and those drops become a current, carving a path into the riverbed of your mind. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroplasticity in action. Your brain is not a static machine, it is a living, breathing landscape, and repetition is the sculptor. When you imagine a scenario vividly and repeatedly, your brain responds as if it were real. The neural pathways fire. The emotional centers activate. The body reacts. Over time, the brain stops asking, "Is this true?" and begins to accept, "This is familiar." And in the world of the subconscious, familiarity is truth. This is the science behind what may seem like a spiritual mystery. Your brain, for all its power, cannot always tell the difference between reality and imagination, especially when emotion is involved. Mental rehearsal is more than daydreaming. It's a form of internal training. Athletes use it before they ever step onto the field. Musicians practice entire concerts in their minds before touching an instrument. And each time they do, their brains are wiring for success. The circuits strengthen, the response becomes faster, the imagined performance becomes a rehearsal for the real one. But here's the twist: this process isn't limited to skills. It works just as powerfully for beliefs. You can mentally rehearse being confident, being loved, being free, and your brain will begin to lay the neural foundation for that version of you. Have you ever noticed how a lie, told often enough, starts to feel true? That's not just a psychological phenomenon, it's neurological. The more a thought is repeated, the more it embeds itself into the architecture of your mind. Think of it like walking the same trail through a forest. The first time, it's rough, uncertain. But walk it 100 times, and the path becomes clear, easy, even automatic. This is what happens inside your brain with each repetition. Thoughts you once questioned become default beliefs. And the most fascinating part, your body begins to follow, your posture changes, your voice shifts, your decisions reflect the new pattern. All from a thought that began as a conscious choice, a whisper you repeated, until your brain turned it into a song. Let me ask you this: have you ever visualized something so many times that it started to feel like a memory, even if it hadn't happened yet? A job interview, a conversation, a moment of triumph. That feeling isn't fantasy. It's the brain anchoring itself to your imagined experience. It's preparing, and in doing so, it makes that scenario more likely. Not because of some mystical force, at least, not yet, but because your brain is laying out the circuitry for that reality. The clearer the image, the stronger the response. And the stronger the response, the more your mind begins to believe this is real. This is me. This is where I'm going. What are your experiences with this? Have you ever rehearsed a version of your life in your mind until it began to take shape in reality? Share your story in the comments. So now the question becomes, if the brain can believe a lie and turn it into truth, what happens when we feed it a vision of who we want to become? What happens when we consciously choose the lie of our future success and repeat it until the brain treats it like fact? This is the gateway to transformation. But we're not there yet, because belief alone isn't enough. There is a moment when belief starts to shape identity, when the brain no longer sees this as something we do, but as someone we are. And that moment changes everything. So what happens when the mind believes a new version of you? Before the world sees it, let's step into that next. Picture this: you're no longer repeating a thought to convince yourself of something, you're repeating it because it's starting to feel like who you are. This is the turning point, the moment where repetition stops being mental rehearsal and becomes identity formation. What began as a sentence you whispered in doubt slowly becomes the truth you embody with quiet certainty. It's no longer about pretending to be confident, abundant, or magnetic. You simply are. And this shift doesn't happen in some dramatic, cinematic moment. It happens invisibly, incrementally, deep beneath the surface of your conscious awareness. Each repetition acts like a brick. Over time, you're not building a house of thoughts. You're becoming the architect who already lives in it. In the language of the subconscious mind, repetition equals reality. The subconscious doesn't care if a statement is logical, verified, or even possible. It only asks, is this familiar? Is this consistent? And if it is, it begins to adapt. That means the more often you repeat a belief, the more your subconscious works to align your choices, emotions, and behaviors with it. This is where real transformation begins. Because the subconscious governs over 90% of your daily actions, and when it's reprogrammed with a repeated identity, it stops sabotaging you and starts supporting you. Imagine that. Imagine your inner autopilot leading you toward your desires, not away from them. It doesn't require more force. It requires more familiarity. Have you ever noticed how people who succeed often act like their success was inevitable? It's not arrogance, it's embodiment. They've rehearsed their identity so thoroughly consciously or unconsciously that they move through life as if they already are the person they once hoped to become. They make decisions faster. They recover from failure more easily. They walk into a room with certainty. Why? Because their self-concept has been rehearsed into existence. They're no longer performing, they're remembering. That version of themselves isn't a fantasy, it's a framework they've been reinforcing through thought, emotion, and action. And the foundation of that framework, repetition. Let me ask you something. What belief about yourself have you been repeating unconsciously for years? Maybe it's I'm not good enough, or I always fail, or I'm not ready yet. What if those were never true, but simply familiar? And what if you replace them with new beliefs not once, but 100 times a day? What if you declared, with rhythm and intention, I am powerful, I am aligned, I am already becoming what I once only dreamed of? The truth is, you are what you repeat, and when your repetitions are intentional, your identity transforms. Share with us in the comments, what new identity are you ready to program into your being? But here's where things get even more interesting. Repetition builds the structure, but emotion lights it up. It adds electricity to the framework, turning belief into resonance. That's when your thoughts stop being passive affirmations and start becoming magnetic fields. You feel the change. You walk differently, speak differently, and life begins to respond. But why? Why does emotion accelerate this shift? What is it about feeling that turns repetition into frequency? That's exactly where we're heading next, because repetition alone shapes identity. But emotion starts to bend reality. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're not just saying the words, you're feeling them, deeply, repeatedly, as if every cell in your body is vibrating with the meaning behind them. This is the difference between mental repetition and energetic creation. Because thought alone is like a blueprint, important, but lifeless. Emotion is what fills it with electricity. It's the current that turns potential into power. When you repeat a vision 100 times, but each time feel it as if it were already true, you're not just visualizing, you're tuning into a frequency. A magnetic signal that doesn't just stay inside you, it begins to ripple outward, shaping how reality responds to your presence. This isn't magic, it's resonance. Physics tells us that similar frequencies attract. And in the realm of thought and feeling, the same principle applies. When your internal state becomes aligned with a particular emotion, joy, confidence, abundance, you start drawing in experiences that mirror that frequency. This is the deeper current behind what many call the law of attraction. It's not about wishing harder or hoping louder. It's about becoming emotionally aligned with the reality you want to experience, feeling it so vividly, so consistently, that your entire being begins to broadcast it not as a request, but as a statement of being. This is why emotion is called energy in motion, because once it's in motion within you, everything else begins to move. Think about this. Have you ever remembered a moment from your past so intensely that it brought tears to your eyes or made your heart race? That memory became real in your body, didn't it? The mind doesn't distinguish between what is felt in the present and what is imagined with enough emotion. So now imagine doing that not with the past, but with the future. What happens when you feel a future version of yourself, repeatedly, passionately, as if it's happening right now? The body listens, the nervous system adapts, your decisions shift, and soon, without forcing anything, you begin to act from that place. Reality starts to mold around the emotional imprint you've embedded within yourself. What future do you long to feel into? Let us know in the comments. This is the secret behind those who seem to manifest effortlessly. It's not luck, it's frequency. They have practiced the inner sensation of success so often that they walk through the world as if it already exists. And that state becomes magnetic. It draws in conversations, opportunities, relationships, moments not through force, but through attraction. Because the world is always responding to who you are, not what you want. And when your emotions are aligned with your vision, you become a magnet. This doesn't mean you bypass action. It means your actions are guided by alignment. You move with clarity, not desperation. With intention, not confusion. With calm certainty, not blind hope. But if all of this happens inside, why does the world begin to shift? Why do signs appear, doors open, and synchronicities become more frequent when you feel your future so strongly? What mechanism connects the internal emotional state to the external unfolding of reality? The answer lies in the silent language of the subconscious mind, and how it begins to guide your perception, choices, and even timing. When your internal state is clear, the external world begins to match it like a dance that was always waiting for your lead. And that is where we go next, because emotion gives your vision power, but the subconscious mind is what gives it direction. Have you ever had a moment where reality felt like it was gently nudging you? A song playing at the right time, a stranger saying exactly what you needed to hear, a door opening that you didn't even knock on. These aren't just random coincidences, they're whispers, subtle echoes of the inner work you've been doing. When you begin to repeat, feel, and embody a vision consistently, your subconscious mind starts filtering the world through that lens, and that shift in perception is what many call synchronicity. The truth is, your reality is always speaking. The question is, have you trained yourself to listen? Your subconscious is like an internal compass, constantly scanning your environment for alignment with your beliefs. Once you implant a new belief through repetition and emotion, it begins searching for evidence. Not because you're delusional, but because your brain is designed to focus on what you believe matters. This is known in neuroscience as the reticular activating system, the mental filter that decides what you notice and what you ignore. When you feed it a repeated, emotionally charged vision, it tunes itself to that signal. Suddenly, opportunities seem to appear where before there was nothing. But they didn't appear. You did. You tuned in. You activated the part of yourself that could finally see them. Think of it this way: you walk through the world every day surrounded by possibilities. But most go unnoticed because they don't match your internal narrative. The moment your narrative changes, your awareness shifts. What was once background noise becomes signal. That's how life starts whispering back. It shows you the people, the places, the choices that align with who you're becoming. And more importantly, it helps you act on them. This is how transformation begins to solidify, not just as a feeling inside, but as a new rhythm in your life. Your timing sharpens, your intuition strengthens, and your confidence grows, not from results, but from resonance. Let me ask you, have you ever made a decision that felt irrational, but ended up being exactly right? That wasn't luck. That was alignment. That was your subconscious whispering back, nudging you toward your future. And the more you practice this repetition with emotion and presence, the louder those whispers become. Eventually, they turn into a dialogue. Life becomes a conversation between your inner and outer worlds. And you realize something profound: the universe was never silent. You were just tuned to the wrong frequency. So, tell us, what signs have you been noticing lately? What subtle messages have come your way? Share them in the comments. Your insight may help someone else awaken. But this all leads to a deeper question: if repetition can shift perception, and perception guides reality, then what is the ultimate purpose of this entire practice? Is it to get what you want? Or is it to become who you were always meant to be? The answer goes beyond goals, beyond manifestation. Because once your reality starts responding to your inner world, you're no longer chasing outcomes. You're living from a new identity. And that identity doesn't just experience change, it creates it. So what if the real gift isn't in what you manifest, but in who you become in the process? That's what we'll explore next. In the beginning, You may have started this journey with a desire, a vision, something specific you wanted to create or attract, a new reality, a new relationship, a better version of your life. But somewhere along the path of repetition, of emotion, of alignment, something else began to happen. You changed, not just your thoughts, not just your habits. You, the practice that started as a way to manifest an outcome, became a sacred act of self-creation. And now, looking back, you realize the true gift wasn't what you got, it was who you became in the process. Repetition is not a trick to hack reality. It's a mirror. With every phrase you repeated, you weren't just convincing the universe, you were revealing yourself to yourself. You were stripping away who you were told to be, who you feared you were, and slowly stepping into who you actually are. Each time you affirmed your worth, your power, your vision, you weren't asking for permission. You were reclaiming authorship. You were remembering. Because deep down, you were never broken, never incomplete, just buried. And the 100 times technique, it didn't fix you, it unveiled you. Let me ask you something. Have you noticed how your decisions are different now? How your energy feels more grounded, your presence more intentional, your actions more aligned? That is not a side effect. That is the result. The repetition didn't just change your circumstances, it recalibrated your identity. You stopped operating from fear and started choosing from truth. You stopped chasing outcomes and began embodying essence. And that is the ultimate power of this practice. It doesn't give you things, it gives you yourself. Not the version you were taught to be, but the one you came here to remember. So here's the moment of truth. The shift you were seeking was never about the outside. It was always internal. The moment you began to believe, to feel, to repeat, you became the source. The world didn't change, first you did. And as you changed, the world responded in kind. This is not philosophy, it's physics. Vibration meets vibration. Identity magnetizes experience. Who you are determines what you see, how you move, what you allow. So now, you're not manifesting a goal, you're expressing a state. You're not reaching for a dream, you are the dream. And everything else is simply catching up. You started as a seeker, but look at you now. You are not waiting, you are not hoping, you are creating. And it all began with a choice to repeat a thought, a vision, a belief again and again, until it no longer felt like effort, but truth. And that is the final revelation. Devotion shapes destiny. You weren't practicing for a moment, you were practicing becoming. And now, the future is no longer a mystery, it is a reflection. So ask yourself, what belief are you ready to repeat into being? What version of yourself are you now ready to embody? If this touched something in you, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video just change everything. And feel free to share your experience in the comments. Your story might be the whisper someone else needs to hear.